Hi, everybody out there. An extra special treat for you today following the UFO hearings, the latest ones held by Congress. And we have with us Ron James, who is the media director of MUFON and also the author and the producer of Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations, which exposes much of what's been going on and much hidden all these years by the government with the UFO situation. So, Ron, today's hearings, did it break any new ground, bring forth any new information?
Well, for people that are versed in the field, we're still not getting new information, but we came closer with these hearings to confirming that there is a very closely guarded program inside government and industry that is studying craft and other materials of non-human origin. And that has never been officially brought into a hearing with witnesses that are close enough to it to really be able to speak with authority. So that is a huge leap forward. It's still not the disclosure that we're looking for. We just want them to come forward and tell us the truth. But it enters into the public record testimony that this stuff is indeed real. And the film Accidental Truth really is like a roadmap to this. It lays out all of the things that have been talked about by David Grush. In fact, half of the people that are in today's headlines are actually in the movie.
In fact, the movie was mentioned in today's hearing.
Yes. Tim Burchett mentioned the movie Accidental Truth. He's in it, talking about this stuff. Ralph Blumenthal, who broke the story about David Grush, is in the movie. Michio Kaku, the famous physicist, is in the movie. Lou Elizondo, the guy who ran the Pentagon ATIP program, is in the movie. It's really like a roadmap to disclosure. And I've been told that that it's made its rounds through Congress, it's made its rounds to the intelligence community, and that it could very well be part of the reason we're starting to see more truth.
For those who haven't seen it yet, how do they get it? Where's it available?
Oh, you can get it on any of the digital platforms, Amazon Prime, Apple iTunes, and then some of the less known ones, Vudu, Crackle, Redbox, places like that. But mostly Amazon and Apple is pretty much where people can reach it.
And the title, once again, is what?
Oh, it's called Accidental Truth, UFO Revelations. I made the film. It's narrated by Matthew Modine, who was in Stranger Things and is in the new movie Oppenheimer. So it's a really A-list talent, and it's won a lot of awards. We've won 15 film festival awards so far.
Actually, the title, Accidental Truth, kind of reinforces what was going on in the hearing today, where there is accumulating evidence that has been revealed, perhaps accidentally, that becomes, to a point, overwhelmingly, it points to it being true. So it's like an accidental release of the truth, correct?
Yeah, that's the theme of the movie. I define accidental truth at the very beginning as an accidental truth is what occurs when a combination of statements and evidence lead one to a inescapable conclusion that was not intended to be revealed. And so that's kind of what it is. I corner some people in my interview techniques, and they say things that they didn't mean to say, and I use it in the film. And so we have a scientist admitting blatantly that he's studied classified materials for the government. We have people admitting that there is a non-human intelligence. We have Christopher Mellon, from former Undersecretary of Defense, acknowledging that there's probably crash debris being studied by groups that even he couldn't get access to. And so these are not things that they want to say and that they've been willing to say publicly, but we kind of coaxed them into it.
Yeah, most of the congressional committee members were on board with the testimony, and they found the witnesses very credible, very experienced, very respected in their fields. But there was one congressperson who was kind of skeptical, saying that, well, if they can come vast distances through space, how come they crash? How come the technology doesn't prevent a crash? Now, among the general public, I think there's a growing belief that the UFOs are real, that the evidence has been hidden by the government, but there's others that still are not quite sure that it could actually be. Now, what's your answer to that argument? And it actually, Dr. Jacobs has said UFOs don't crash. He's the one who was an expert on alien abductions. So what's your answer to that? Why do they crash if the technology is so advanced?
Well, for one thing, it's still technology. And I'll elaborate on that further in a second. But to address the first issue, because this is one of the biggest arguments that people present for it being impossible for non-human intelligence that originates on another planet to be here on Earth, is the distances. But we have evidence that we presented in the film that the government has done secret studies on things like traversable wormholes, which would enable a craft with sufficient technology to bend space-time and traverse great distances, bypassing the speed of light and all the other rules. This is technology that most physicists agree today is possible. NASA's already developed the beginnings of what would be a warp drive system based on science that we know. We can't do it yet, but the idea that distance is an obstacle is pretty much going by the wayside and is going to be proven to be not the problem that it is, probably within our lifetimes. But the other part of the question where we're talking about, the fact that these things have crashed, it's still technology. And any kind of technology that is a nuts and bolts machine runs the risk of malfunctioning. And when you look at what are, really a few isolated events, then it's not such a stretch. With the thing that happened in Roswell, I just drove through that part of the country. These are vast plains that go for miles and miles and miles where there's nothing. And then they have these crazy lightning storms. And, the story about what could have downed those craft was some sort of interference with their flight systems that was caused by electromagnetic energy and storms. It's not a stretch. And then it's also possible that some of these crashes were really done on purpose to give us a trail of breadcrumbs to follow. So the idea that this technology is so perfect that it could never, ever crash, malfunction, or break, it's still technology made by somebody out of parts and components. So if that's true, then it's going to be prone to failure at some point, even if it's very, very rare.
Ron, the flight characteristics, and there's been simultaneous visual sightings and on radar, acceleration in a split second and thousands of miles an hour from a standing point, known physics, or at least publicly disclosed physics, cannot account for those kind of maneuvers. Now, is it your belief and the belief of some of the witnesses that we heard that the United States has developed that kind of a new understanding of physics by reverse engineering, so that then we're that far along, we're beginning to understand how these craft operate?
I interviewed Lou Elizondo, the man who ran the ATIP program, back in 2018, and he's in the film talking about this, and also Dr. Michio Kaku. We do understand how these craft work. I don't think that we've been able to build completely working models that mimic them to this point yet, but we understand the physics behind it. We understand the theory behind it. A lot of it has to do with a couple of different things. It's one, if you can slightly phase in and out of this dimension, then it enables you to traverse matter in a completely different way. And I'm not a scientist, so I just leave it at that. But it is theoretically possible to bypass the rules of physics by simply going out of phase with physical reality to the point where it minimizes the presence of obstacles such as water and air and space. And that's why it makes it so that these things can go down from space through the air into the water with barely a splash, if at all, is because they're able to generate potentially some kind of a field around the craft that, like I said, puts them in and out of phase with physical matter and enables them to bypass the stuff.
Yeah, well,
that's a theory, but it's pretty well regarded.
Traditionally, the argument against interstellar and intergalactic travel was that nothing could exceed the speed of light, according to Einstein's theory. So therefore, if you can't exceed the speed of light, it would take thousands of years to travel even from one star to the other. But you're saying interdimensional travel, the speed of light would not be a factor, it wouldn't limit travel. to the speed of light.
No, even it's been a really long time. Even Star Trek, the TV series from the '60s, talked about warp drive. They're proving now that it's more and more feasible. Even Einstein, in the theory of relativity, where he put that speed limit on space, acknowledged that there is probably a way to get around it, and that way is basically a technology that will take space, like we see it right here, and literally enable you to bend it so that instead of going across this giant plane of distance, you're able to use an energetic pattern to just bypass in and out. And that was the stuff of science fiction years ago, but now it's really not. It's being acknowledged as something that's probable.
Ron, there's still some people that believe, or at least suspect, that this is a gradual rollout by the U.S. government, that this is intentional. And these people are being put forward to get the public accustomed to the idea of UFOs being real. And at the end of this process, there's even speculation that they're going to stage a fake alien invasion to bring in a new world government, all kinds of theories about that. But what I find as a journalist, what I see now distinctly different, changing, is that the reports on this in the media, the mainstream media, which had always been skeptical, tongue-in-cheek, laughing, giggling about it, winking, now they're taking it much more seriously. And some people would say it's like everybody got the memo now to start giving this some credibility because the government wants it that way. What's your response to that?
Well, I'm definitely a believer that what we're seeing in the media is a controlled release of information. That started back when the story broke with Ralph Blumenthal in the New York Times. We again, and I'm not trying to keep plugging the movie, but we tell this entire story of how this was rolled out, why and why it's being done the way it's being done. There are powers that be that don't want to see this information get out. And so what we've been witnessing in the press and the media is basically the results of an internal tug of war over this information and how it's going to be released. But it is definitely being controlled as best that they can control it. And the idea that there's going to be a fake alien invasion, that Project Blue Beam was what it was called at one time. I've spoken with several people about this being feasible. And, 10 years ago, maybe, 20 years ago, maybe you could fake something like that. Today, it is so easy to fake that if you did it, half the people that saw it with their own eyes wouldn't believe it. We live in this world where you can't convince anybody of anything, and then sometimes you can convince people of things that are completely far-fetched and insane. So the idea that a big flying saucer is going to land and blow up a city, and it was all engineered by the government to bring about some sort of worldwide political change, there's probably better ways to bring about the new world order than to try and stage a fake alien invasion in the day when pretty much anybody with a computer and CG and some explosives could do it themselves.
Well, there had been, for years now, there had been circulating a story about Wernher von Braun's secretary. It was told by Wernher von Braun in his dying days that the government would eventually do this. Have you heard anything about that in terms of that credibility?
Sure. And, Wernher von Braun's a very interesting character. He was, obviously the father of rocketry, so to speak, one of, and then also very involved in a lot of secret stuff that was happening. He designed spaceships to go to the moon and further to Mars. And some people say those spaceships were built, but we don't know. And let's face it, the government games just about everything. Every scenario they can come up with, somebody is sitting in a war room coming up with ideas on how to execute it. And false flag operations are part of military strategy going as far back as militaries themselves. So the idea that somebody floated the idea of staging a fake alien invasion to bring about whatever purpose probably was floated. People probably talked about it. Some people probably planned it, but I don't think that the execution of it is feasible.
When you say this is a controlled release of information, who's controlling it? And how are they? So are these witnesses part of the controlled information being manipulated by the government, or are they on their own?
Well, see, when we say government, we have to be very aware of what it is we're saying. we have our front-facing government. We have the people that we elect. And then we have the people at the Pentagon that are privy to some of this stuff, high ups at the Air Force, things like that. And then we have levels of government that are so deep and so buried inside of compartmentalized black programs that we will never know who they are, and they're not accountable to anybody. And these groups, the formation of, say, Majestic 12 back in the time of the Roswell incident, we don't know for sure that there was a group called MJ12 and that the people that are supposedly a part of it are people that were really doing that. But it only makes common sense that if you were to encounter some sort of an unknown craft from another planet or another place, certainly the president's going to put together a group to handle the information and manage it. Whether it was called MJ12 and whether it was those people or not, that's not a debate I'll get into, but it makes common sense that some sort of group would have been formed to do that. And once they decided that this whole thing needed to be kept secret, well, then that was their decision. And they've had almost 100 years now to 75 for sure to engineer that secrecy, and accountable to nobody, tons of black budget money. Some of the stuff got ported into private industry where that's not even accessible through Freedom of Information Act requests. A piece of the spaceship here, a piece of technology to Lockheed, a piece of material to Raytheon. Nobody really knows the whole story except for very, very few people. And most of those people are probably dead. And so what we're dealing with is this extremely dark underground organization that is accountable to nobody, and that perhaps over time doesn't even exist in institutional memory anymore. It's very, very complicated. But there is somebody that is aware of this stuff, and there are some people that have bits and pieces of it. And the need to start disclosing this reality to humanity could be for a variety of reasons. But we're going to have Elon Musk landing on Mars pretty soon. We're going to have a lot of other countries going into space, landing on the moon. If there is truth to all of this, which I certainly believe there is, then it's only a matter of time until it becomes self-evident. So whoever it is that's managing this information, and whoever it is that has the ability to pull the strings of, let's march forth an intelligence agent guy who's going to say, yeah, I ran a secret program studying UFOs. Let's march out David Grush, who's going to say, yeah, we really do have these things. None of this is happening by accident.
What many people are curious about, and this also came out as a question today during the hearing, what is the motive of these people, these witnesses coming out and exposing all this?
Well, I think at
risk to their careers, even perhaps to their personal safety. Why are they doing this?
Well, in Lou Elizondo's case, it wasn't really any risk whatsoever. The surface story is that he was frustrated with not getting anywhere within DOD, and so he decided to retire and resign in protest. But what we have to realize is that to the Stars Academy, this group of people that was made up of ex-government guys and Tom DeLonge, the rock star, that was waiting in the wings to raise millions of dollars to study this stuff. And Lou was a part of that, and he knew it. And so he didn't risk anything to come forward. And you know, he's been a member of the intelligence community for years. And once you're in that community, you never stop. It's like being in the mafia. You can't quit. And so if you look at the cast of characters that came out with TTSA, every one of them had deep intelligence backgrounds from the same group of people that have been lying to us for all these years. And then you look at David Grush. He, I believe, had permission to come out and say this. In fact, he had to get permission from the Pentagon to do the News Nation interview. And it's why he hasn't done other interviews. It was very carefully orchestrated, very carefully worded. And the fact that he came out as a whistleblower, he did that because he's protected. I'm sure he has a personal interest in this, but there is no, he did not risk his life to come out and say this stuff.
Okay, but
at some level.
But one of the witnesses was asked if people have been harmed, even killed, and the witness said, I can't discuss that. He didn't say no. That came out today in the hearing.
Well, no, because over time, you know, the intelligence community used to be a lot more ruthless than they are now when it came to taking people out. there's a history of people. Phil Snyder is one of these guys that came out and talked about secret underground bases and ETs, and was found, committed suicide by wrapping a guitar string around his neck. So that yeah, any kind of clandestine government program that is of the utmost secrecy, people that are involved, people that know, run the risk of being taken out if they reveal too much. That's how it works. But the UFO field, I believe, it hasn't been like that for a long time, but I do believe that there were times when it was like that. There's witnesses from Roswell that say that they were told by men in black that if they said anything about what they saw, they could never find them in the desert. And so, yeah, we know that kind of stuff has happened, and we know that people would be willing to kill to protect these secrets.
Oh, another question is this: why do these witnesses think it's so important that this be exposed publicly?
This is the future of humanity. This is the biggest deception that's ever been perpetrated on humankind. The people that chose to do this and the way they chose to do it, for whatever reason, personally, I think it's somewhat nefarious and also somewhat ignorant, and also somewhat made from not really having a choice. The secrecy needed to be enacted for reasons we're not aware of yet. But this is the biggest question facing humanity: is, are we alone in the universe? There's the life after death question, there's the nature of reality question, and then there's this question. Nothing else supersedes this. And for every one of us on a personal and collective level to be deprived of information that helps us to determine our own place in the universe is literally, in my opinion, a crime against humanity. And it's time that it stop.
Ron, I agree with that premise. It's the eternal question, and it should be answered someday in some way. But what I'm getting at is these people were with the Secret Government Operations Intelligence Committee. Now, the argument could be made that if we are reverse engineering this technology, this gives us a jump on our adversaries. So why expose it publicly and give the enemies of the United States more information that this is going on, and perhaps some leads on how they could do it themselves? Is that not itself the public disclosure of threats to national security?
Not really. I mean, and here's why. Lockheed builds airplanes. Okay. What does that tell an enemy? Nothing. If we say that we've recovered some kind of craft and we're attempting to reverse engineer it, okay, it's not revealing anything. It's not talking about what the technologies are, or where our progress is on the reverse engineering. It's not revealing anything that's going to give our adversaries an edge. If anything, it might make them a little nervous because they're going to want to know what it is that we've got. But it's also rumored that other countries have recovered craft too, and they all have their own reverse engineering programs. So I don't think that revealing the existence of these craft and the fact that we have been trying to figure out what makes them work is revealing anything that's that detrimental to national security. It's like I said, Lockheed builds airplanes. We all know that. We know their latest top secret airplane that they've built. No. Are we revealing anything that threatens national security by acknowledging that they're building the 5th and 6th generation fighter jets? No. So, just saying that these things exist does not damage national security at all, I don't think.
Okay, so the analogy is not valid to say, compare it to the development of the atomic bomb. It was theoretical until Oppenheimer and others made it practical. And once the other nations realized it could be done, it could be engineered, you could actually make an atomic bomb, take it away from the theoretical realm, that motivated them to take steps to manufacture them themselves. And that's exactly what happened. So is that analogy applicable in any way?
Well, I don't think so entirely. There's a certain amount of validity for that. But again, if we're not telling what the technology we derived is, then we're not tipping our hand to what can be done. In other words, if we can finally just break to the public that, yes, we have craft of supposed non-human origin, and we have been trying to figure out what makes them work, and that's all we're going to say. It's not like, oh, and this science splits the atom, or we figured out antigravitic drive and here's how it works. When the atom bomb was created by Oppenheimer, Other countries were already working on this. Germany had a program, Japan had a program. It was only a matter, Russia had a program. It was only a matter of time until they did it. Just because one country did it first didn't prompt all the other countries to start figuring it out. And again, if we can reveal the existence of the technology, we can reveal that we've been studying it, but we don't have to say what it is. But it would be nice, obviously, but for national security reasons, I could understand that. But to at least acknowledge it, again, I don't think it's a threat. I think that we need to know.
All right, let's get back to how I started this interview about whether anything really new came out of this hearing today, anything that wasn't disclosed before.
Well, it's not so much that stuff that wasn't disclosed before came out. No, there wasn't anything new, especially if you're in the UFO community. Nobody today told anybody anything they don't already know. But the fact that it was done in this official capacity, that it was entered into the official record of Congress, the fact that for the first time, even in these UFO hearings, we finally have somebody speaking on some authority, acknowledging that this is originating from non-human intelligence. Now, you could say, well, that's been disclosed before, it's been discussed, the UFO community knows about it, Ancient Aliens makes an entire series about it, but it's never been officially dropped into a congressional record. And it's just the beginning of more, because you can't drop something like that out on the public. I know for a fact that Congress people, Tim Burchett and these guys, I briefed Tim Burchett on the whole story from Roswell moving forward. I actually videotaped the entire interview with him where I told him everything I know about the cover up and everything else. And Andre Carson, I had lunch with him. I know these guys know. Gillibrand, Rubio, they all know the story. And so they have a mission too, to get it out. They have to walk tight ropes that people like me don't have to walk. And I respect that, but they know what's going on, and they're doing what they can to bring it to the public within the constraints they have to operate in.
Ron, MUFON has done stellar work over the years, and I've noticed that the MUFON people I've talked to are very cautious about making any unsubstantiated statements. They're very cautious in what's known and what is speculation, and that lends to the credibility of the organization. Now, what is your belief of what's out there?
Well, MUFON, the organization, it's a mutual UFO network. It's been around for 55 years, world's largest and oldest organization studying the UFO topic. And its charter is the scientific understanding of UFOs for the benefit of humanity. There's a lot of people in MUFON that have different opinions about this stuff, and they do range from the very conservative to the esoteric. But officially, it's very important to us to stay in the rails of what we can reasonably explain.
Yeah.
And so that is what gives us the credibility that we have, and enables us to go to Washington and have these closed door meetings that we've had. But my personal belief is that what's our definition of life? Lou Elizondo in my movie says that there are things happening within our physical reality that we can't even conceive of. There are things that make our physical reality work that we don't even know. I mean, we're like birds trying to figure out how to drive a car. That was an analogy I heard one time. So the idea that there are all types of life, some of which we can't conceive, the idea that there is certainly life in outer space, that almost every scientist would agree that it would be almost impossible for that to not be true. The idea that there's some kind of interaction by multiple non-human intelligences with our planet, with our solar system, with our galaxy, I think that all of this is probably true. Oh, and of course, the idea that the government or elements of it know a lot more about it than they're ever going to tell us, I believe that's true too.
Here's one of the old arguments against disclosure. The danger of full disclosure is that it would panic the public. People would be seeing the aliens on Main Street, like in that Rod Serling story, Twilight Zone. Religion would be challenged. Our whole concept of ourselves would fall apart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Could the public handle it?
Well, the argument used to be, well, of course the public can handle it. And then the other side of that argument was, well, of course they can't. It would disassemble the social fabric of our society. I think the answer is a little more nuanced, and it has really, there's gray areas now that people hadn't thought about. And it really has everything to do with the context of the disclosure. And what I mean by that is that if there were to be an official announcement that we're not alone in the universe and that there's other intelligences that are interacting with us here on the planet, if that was announced and it was like, we're not sure what they are, we've had limited communication, they seem to do their thing, we do our thing, and it doesn't really seem to be like there's an adversarial thing. Most people would go, yeah, well, we knew that, and they'd go on with their lives. But if the announcement was there are these beings doing this, that we're not sure if they're adversarial or not, but they're kidnapping our people, they're doing experiments on our people, they're doing all kinds of things that we can't control, and from what we can tell, it's going to get worse. Well, that's when you start to have a problem. So it's like it's the context of the disclosure and what it really means to every one of us individually.
But wouldn't it feed into that kind of rumor mill anyway? No matter how tame disclosure is, people are going to be looking at their neighbors. Politicians are shape-shifting reptilian aliens, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, again,
we already have that. So it's like the official disclosure of non-human intelligent life is the same problem with humanity that makes us that way. Constantly willing to inflate beliefs, constantly willing to look for enemies everywhere we go, constantly at war with each other, constantly believing just ridiculous things that can easily be disproven. That's the same kind of qualities that I believe makes it very difficult for an alien species to come here and say, hi, humans, we're here and we'd like to invite you to fly on spaceships to other planets. I'm sure they're not going to do that. We're dangerous.
And you could categorically deny and assure us now that you're not a shape-shifting reptilian alien sent here for a slow rollout and eventually an envelopment of humanity.
I'm not a shape-shifting reptilian.
I've been accused of worse, so. But Ron, thanks for being with us today. And despite my attempted humor, I know it's a very serious.
No, I think that's pretty funny. And perhaps we're all aliens. Really, the idea that human DNA has been engineered from different types of genetic experiments here on the planet, that's not a stretch. There's evidence there's gaps in the gene sequencing of human evolution that are still unexplainable. No. And so I'm not sure where I stand on the shape-shifting reptiles, but I do think personally, and I'm not saying this for MUFON, but I think that there's probably uncountable living species throughout the galaxy. And I think that some of them, Earth, let's face it, if you're a galactic federation or whatever, Earth is a pretty valuable piece of real estate. It's in the Goldilocks zone. It has life. It has rich genetic diversity. And for all we know, it belongs to somebody. That's not a stretch.
Well, that's kind of like the scenario that panicked people when there was a radio broadcast back in the 30s.
Yeah. But I think that the idea that we're not alone is people pretty much know it already. We've got a whole generation that was raised on Ancient Aliens. This is not a stretch for them to perceive. And at some point, we're either going to self-destruct or we're going to reach a spacefaring level of technology. And I'm sure that there are going to be species out there that are waiting to either repel us or greet us with open arms. But at the end of the day, it's up to us. And if we cannot evolve past the things that are causing us to destroy ourselves and destroy the planet, then we're just going to be another extinct race on another barren planet that lost its atmosphere like Mars. So it's up to humanity. And I believe if there is any kind of non-human intelligence watching this, it's hands off. It's the Star Trek Prime Directive. You got to let this species resolve itself and reach whatever destiny it's going to reach. And if we manage to survive, we have an amazing future as humans. And if we just continue along some of the paths we're on, we're just going to be a footnote. So it's up to every one of us to make this world a better place. And then whatever our galactic future is will reveal itself.
Ron James, the media director of MUFON and also the author and producer of Accidental Truth UFO Revelations. Thanks for being with us, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.